It's now time for Community Conversations, a program focusing on the people working to make the Jonesboro community a better place, while offering viewpoints from all sides of the issues. The views expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of KLEK 102.5 FM, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council, or our underwriters or sponsors.
KLEK 102.5 FM. Good afternoon. I don't know why I'm wanting to start after. I didn't get much sleep last night. Good morning to you. It's Friday, November 4th, 2016. This is Community Conversations. Kato Wonder is in the studio with you. I also have my co-host, Mrs. Quabila Harden, in the studio. And joining us today is Mr. Frank Gilbert. Mr. Gilbert is the Libertarian candidate for the United States Senate for Arkansas. Let me go ahead and give a disclaimer. KLEK and the Voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council does not endorse or support any candidate for office, nor is any compensation provided for this interview. This interview is provided for informational purposes only, and we hope that you do get some information today, because Tuesday is the big day. So if you have not voted, make sure that you get out and express your voice, and just get out and vote. How you doing today, Mr. Gilbert?
I'm better than I deserve, thank you. How
you? Well, we're doing pretty good. I want to thank you, Mr. Gilbert. You drove from South Arkansas all the way to Jonesboro just to sit down in studio with us. So we hope that you had a good night rest and that you had a good drive here.
I did. Got to see part of the state that I don't get to see often, and it is pleasant to be here.
Well, thank you.
All right. Well, Mr. Gilbert, as always, we'll start off with telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. I've been elected to office as a Republican, as an independent, and now as a Libertarian.
Okay.
And my progress through my life has taken me to nearly all points of the political spectrum. And I am pleased to finally be in a political party that recognizes that every human being is a free agent, that they have the absolute right to live their life in any way they want to, so long as they don't interfere in the rights of others.
Okay.
And that's a nice position to be in.
Yes,
sir. As a public official in the past, I've served as the coroner of Grant County,
okay,
as the mayor of the town of Tull, and as constable of the DeKalb Township.
Okay.
And in each of those positions, I've continued to work in a full-time job at the Bauxite School District.
Okay.
I took off a couple of years during my term as mayor because the job of mayor got to be almost a full-time job, even in Little Tull, but have gotten to go back to work in Bauxite since then. While serving in Bauxite, it was my pleasure to find out that I could be a union leader.
Okay.
I had never been a member of a union until then. Got the opportunity to be the local president of the Bauxite Education Association, affiliate of the AEA and NEA.
Okay.
And enjoying campaigning. Looking forward to doing it, like you said, until Tuesday.
All right. So, as always, we ask, what made you decide to run for this position at this point in your life?
The Libertarian Party wants to run as many candidates for as many offices as they can.
Okay.
And we decided to start with the bigger offices, the statewide offices and the congressional district offices, and fill all of them so that everybody in Arkansas would have at least 2 Libertarians to vote for, their congressman and their U.S. senator.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that that's the best strategy. Sometimes I think we probably ought to start at the councilman and the JP level and work up from there. But election law makes us do some of this.
Okay.
The Democrats and Republicans have written election law for about 150 years.
Okay.
And would you believe it? The election laws favor the folks who write the laws. Democrats and Republicans make requirements of smaller parties that make it extremely difficult and very expensive to even get on the ballot.
Oh, wow.
And that's why I ran for this office.
All right, we'll go ahead.
Well, maybe after, hearing your interview and going to your website and, reading the things that you have to say, maybe there'll be some people that have a change of mind and say, okay, let's make a change. Of course, we can't tell you who to vote for, but I would advise people just to go check you out and see what you have to say about the issues.
Amen. That's all any of us ought to ask is an opportunity to earn a vote.
And his website is frankgilbertforsenate.com. That website is frankgilbert for Senate.com. I've actually got to pull up, and I'm going to be asking him some questions on the platform that I see on his website later on in the show. But won't you kind of bring it back to the parties just for a bit? I was a political science major for a cup of coffee in college, and I've always been a political junkie. And like we were saying before we started the interview, at least at one time, there was some overlap in positions amongst libertarians and Republicans. Is that still the case, or have the parties sort of drifted apart? And I know one difference that libertarians and Republicans definitely have is on unions. You mentioned that you were with the union, and I know that Republicans typically favor corporations over unions, and actually in some states have worked to actively abolish unions. So just kind of outline some of the differences between the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party, and even the Democratic and Green parties, the other parties as well.
I appreciate that, and there was a lot of overlap. In fact, I came to the LP, the Libertarian Party, from the Republican Party, and I think our separation began when some elements of the Republican Party began to look at the libertarian elements of the Republican Party as not being their friends. When the Tea Parties began to arise, and when Governor Huckabee became the head of the Republican Party in Arkansas, it became difficult for libertarians to remain in the party, not because we believe that drugs are good for us, or that we believe that some behaviors that are allowed by law are necessarily good for us, but we just don't believe that a government ought to be able to tell us how to live our lives, what to drink, what to smoke, what to ingest, what to rub on our faces. It became easier at some point for the libertarian Republicans just to pull out of the party and become full-fledged libertarians, and that's certainly what happened to me.
Okay.
The difference between libertarians and Democrats is probably less pronounced than the difference between us and Republicans. I've found that I agree with my Democrat friends on social issues, and my Republican friends mostly on economic issues. So that third corner of the triangle is foreign affairs, international issues, and there I stand with the Democrats as well. So in my view, 2 out of 3 positions, I lean more to the Democrat side of the old left-right scheme, and only on one of them do I lean to the Republicans. But frankly, libertarians don't look at politics as left and right. We look at it as freedom and tyranny. And libertarians want to be on the extreme end of liberty and avoid tyranny at every possible point.
Sir.
And I think both of the old parties tend to rely on government to enforce their will on the voters and on the people. Republicans want to do it in the bedroom and in what we smoke and drink. Democrats want to do it in forcing us to help those who are less fortunate than ourselves. And though both of those things are good in their own right, I don't believe we need to be drinking every night. I don't think we ought to be addicted to drugs, but I don't think it's the government's business. That's family and church. And I don't believe it's necessary for government to tell us how to take care of our neighbors. Again, that's family and church.
So instead of spending energy and money into telling us what we can and cannot do, should they put that same energy and money into treatment facilities?
Oh, absolutely. And we've got an excellent opportunity. We can look at the little country of Portugal. It's about the size of our a little more population, not much. Little. They'd love to see us move toward. They decriminalized drugs, not just marijuana, but all of them. And the money that they used for enforcement and for incarceration, they began to use for treatment and renewal. And the effect of that has been exciting. They save money by not having to look around for where the drugs are coming from and who has them. They save by not having to incarcerate all those people. And frankly, I think we would save money by using it for renewal of those lives. Then those people become productive citizens. I was an addict for about 20 years. I was addicted to nicotine.
Okay.
And though it was not the smartest thing I ever did, and it was hurting me, and I knew it, it was difficult to quit. But I had that addiction for those 20 years, and it cost me about $4 a day. And that's where the problem comes in. If an addiction costs you $200 a day, then you're going to turn to criminal activity. And if we take the prohibition effects of the law away, it'll be much better. Prohibition didn't work in the 20s. It's not going to work in the 21st century. And until we realize that, we'll continue to have more of our citizens in jail than any other country in the world.
Okay.
And if you stop and think about that, Russia, China, North Korea, those folks don't have as many folks in jail as we do. I think we ought to be ashamed of that, and I think we ought to change it.
We're speaking with Mr. Frank Gilbert, Libertarian candidate for the United States Senate. If you have a question for Mr. Gilbert, you can give us a call at 870-277-1080. Once again, the phone number is 870-277-1080. You can also post on our live stream, and we got a shout out. This is from your fellow compatriot who was on the show yesterday, Mr. Mark West, who is running for the U.S. House. So he's definitely watching and cheering you on.
God bless you, Mark. Thank you for being there for me again.
Okay.
All right, so Mr. West, let's got one question I wanted to ask, and then we're going to go into your platform. What are your thoughts on some of the issues nationwide facing the African American community, such as the Black movement and their concerns about issues with police and the way that minorities are just being treated in the country overall?
You know, I'm an old fart, and I've been around long enough to see some real changes, some important changes in the way this country reacts in racial questions. When I went to high school, we not only segregated black and white, friend, we had a separate school for the browns. That was my start as far as race relations went. And from that, to where we are now, it excites me to see how much we've improved and how much ground we've gained. But in looking forward, you can see that we have a lot left to do. The difference in the way laws are enforced is obvious. And as liberal a man as Mayor Bloomberg continues to support the stop and frisk program in New York City, which was a law enforcement tool that just said if you saw somebody who looked suspicious, the police could just stop them and see what they had on them. If they had a gun or some drugs or something, it was an obvious violation of the Constitution, and it was finally struck down for that reason. But more importantly, from this point, it was a violation of the other amendments, the 13th and 14th, because they weren't stopping whites as often as they did blacks. The enforcement nearly always breaks down at that point. The racial animosity that remains with us is real, and we can't deny it. And I want to say that I support the police. I am proud for every one of them that's out there. And we need to help those good policemen who are out there by weeding out those few who do awful things in the name of the law. And we've all seen it happen.
Yes.
We all know that it happens, and we've got to stop it. One reason that it happens, and one way we can stop it, is that we have laws that have no victim. And those laws are enforced just the same way as the laws that are protecting us from violent people. I don't remember the gentleman's name in New York, but a large black man who was killed. They choked him to death, used an illegal chokehold from their own rules to kill him. And he was killed because he was selling loose cigarettes on the street. The city of New York has an ordinance against selling cigarettes by anything less than 20 packs.
Okay.
Now, why do we have that law? We have that law because the 7-Eleven and the other stores like that don't want the competition. They want to sell cancer sticks 20 at a time and get the profit from it. Mm-hmm. They don't want some independent undercutting their profits by selling cigarettes 1 or 2 at a time. To protect that profit, the police are authorized to kill a man. That has to change too. Because if we only enforce laws where there are victims, it's much more difficult to have that innate racism affect the way that laws are enforced.
All right, Mr. Gilbert, transitioning into that, and this has been a very interesting discussion. Last night, the Lady Arkansas Razorback basketball team, they had a game, and the black female players during the national anthem decided to take a knee. What is the libertarian position on something like that, since libertarians are about freedom? Because basically, you have some people who feel that that you should just always stand for the national anthem no matter what. To not stand is to disrespect the troops. So what is the libertarian position on protests like that?
Friend, libertarians believe that individuals have that innate, inalienable, God-given right to do anything they want to, as long as they're not stealing from, defrauding, or hurting other people. Those ladies didn't hurt anybody. They may have hurt some feelings, but you know what? If we start enforcing laws because feelings are hurt, it's going to get real tough in this country. We just need to suck it up, put on our big boy pants, and handle those kind of things one-on-one as amicably as we can. I served in the military for 4 years during the Vietnam War era.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And I love my country, but I don't love everything about it. And anybody who feels strongly, as those ladies did, that they need to make a point by doing that, I respect. And I want them to be respected by the law and by the university and by their fellow students. And if we don't, then that's shame on us, not on them.
I think that opens a door to have a conversation that this country has needed to have for a long, long time. Oftentimes we get caught up in our own worlds and we just sweep things under the rug, and we think the problem is going to handle itself, and it's not. So instead of being upset in your feelings, let's have a conversation. Let's try to understand why people are doing what they're doing, and learn to have a little compassion versus being upset all the time. So.
You know, and that leads to a personal point. It has nothing to do with the Libertarian Party. But in my religion, the one I was raised in, there was a lot of judgment, a lot of checking folks out and making sure they were doing the right thing. And I think we lose sight of what you just said, the compassion. Christ came to this world to tell us to love one another, nothing else. That was his whole message.
That's right.
Speaking with Mr. Frank Gilbert, Libertarian candidate for the United States Senate. We're going to still get your website. We've been having such a lively discussion on other issues, but in these final 2 minutes of this segment, I'm going to bring up something that has happened on the campaign trail. One of your opponents, Mr. Connor Eldridge, challenged the incumbent Senator, Senator Bozeman, to a series of debates. Senator Bozeman refused to participate in all except one, which was the AETN debate. However, you took up Mr. Eldridge's challenge and you debated him on several occasions. I want to kind of get your thoughts on how those debates went with Mr. Eldridge and your thoughts on the senator refusing to participate in the majority of them.
Boy, I appreciate that. That's one of those things that could be a personal thing with me. You know, the senator kind of dissed Connor and I, some people have told me, and I don't agree with that. I don't think the senator had any obligation to debate me or Connor or anybody else, but I think he does have an obligation to the voters and to his constituents to be public with his positions and to be public with them and understand what they're saying to him as well as what he says to them. And if there was any dissing that went on, it was from Senator Bozeman to the people of Arkansas. And the reason he did that, the reason he can get by with it, is that we're a Republican state. He's an incumbent Republican senator, and he feels like there's nothing he can do that will cost him the election. He feels like he is reelected no matter what. And I hope he learns otherwise on Tuesday.
Well, I mean, the people will speak, so election is coming up, so we'll see what the people have to say.
Amen.
And once again, although we don't endorse nor support any candidate for office, we do encourage you to make your voice known get out and vote for whichever candidate aligns with your views, whether it in this race is Senator Bozeman or Mr. Eldridge or Mr. Gilbert. Make sure that you make your choice known because one of these three men is going to represent you in the United States Senate. We're going to get ready to go ahead and go to break. You are listening to Community Conversations. This is KLEK 102.5 FM.
You're listening to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM. We'll be right back.
Men, how can you be a better dad today than you were yesterday? I'm Mark Merrill with today's Family Minute. Pursuing the goal of being an all-pro dad is one of the most important things you can do in life. And it's a goal we get to strive toward for the rest of our lives. So here are 5 ways to be a better dad to your children. First, be there for your kids. It's so important to set aside one-on-one time for each of your kids so you can get to know them and love them well. Second, share a passion. Find something you both like to do and do it together, whether it's camping, fishing, or playing a sport. Remember, your family first.
For more resources on today's topic, go to markmerrill.com.
Family Minute is made possible by the Kappa Nu Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, a nonprofit organization committed to service to all mankind. Kappa Nu Omega Alpha Kappa Alpha on Facebook.
Car Today, 3404 Stadium Boulevard in Jonesboro. Car Today is a buy here, pay here dealership offering Carfax certified pre-owned vehicles of all makes and models with service contracts and financing for most budgets. Inventory and more information is available at neacartoday.com or 870-931-4224.
Kendall Rucker and Harold Massey presents the inspirational gospel stage play, Love Has No Protection, Saturday, December 10th at Wynn High School, 1300 Falls Boulevard, featuring performers from Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Doors open at 6 p.m. Show starts at 7 p.m. Tickets and other information is available at 870-270-0835.
The New St. John Missionary Baptist Church Outreach Ministry conducts a Pack the Pantry event the first Sunday of every month. The New St. John Food Pantry helps feed the needy in the community. Each member is asked to bring a non-perishable food item of choice. Donations from the public are also accepted. The food pantry is available for those in need daily from 10 o'clock a.m. to 10 o'clock p.m. New St. John Missionary Baptist Church is located at 308 North Main Street in Jonesboro, and more information is available at 870-972-0859 or 870-317-1269. Attention, attention. Rides to the polls to go vote are now being offered for early voting through Election Day. Rides will be offered from 9 o'clock a.m. to noon, 1 o'clock p.m. to 3 o'clock p.m., and 4 o'clock p.m. until the polls close each day. If you need a ride to the polls to go vote, you may call Eugene Holloway at 870-910-5386, Reverend Ted T. Taylor Sr. at 662-418-6502, New St. John Missionary Baptist Church at 870-932-6915, Lachey Robinson at 870-253-9218, or KLEK at 870-277-1080. If you don't get an answer, leave a voicemail and you will be called back. Again, Rides to the polls are now being offered through Election Day. Exercise your right to vote now.
And now back to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
And we're back on Community Conversations with our guest, Mr. Frank Gilbert, Libertarian candidate for the United States Senate. All right, we're going to go ahead and talk about some of Mr. Gilbert's positions, and you can find them on his website, which is frankgilbertforsenate.com. Once again, the website is frankgilbertforsenate.com, and there's a section on here called Platform, and the platform has a few planks. I'm going to list them, and then I'm going to let Mr. Gilbert talk about each one. The first one is fiscal responsibility. The second one is non-interventionist foreign policy. The third is respect the 10th Amendment. The next one is respect the Second Amendment. The next one is close to the Department of Education, then followed by close to the Department of Homeland Security, and the last one is in the IRS. So let's go ahead down the list, starting with fiscal responsibility.
Thank you, friend, and I put that first because I think it's the most important. Our candidate for president, Gary Johnson, has said it for me and for a lot of libertarians when he tells voters, we may never agree about the little things, but we have to work together on the big things. And this is the biggest thing. We are $20 trillion in debt. And being the largest debtor in the history of mankind, there's a price to pay for that. Unfortunately, the price is not going to be paid by me and my generation that started us down this road. It's going to be paid by my grandchildren and their children, because we can't repay that debt in my lifetime. I won't be paying taxes. I'll be molding in the ground before that's done. What we've done is nothing more than cross-generational theft. I have picked the pockets of my great-great-grandchildren, and it's wrong. I hope we can all work to solve that. Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Greens, we have to come to some agreement on that question.
Okay.
All right, and the next one is non-interventionist foreign policy.
Yeah, and that's number 2. It may be number 1 at some point, because what we're doing now is trying to be the policeman of the world. We have troops in 80-something countries. We have bases in 40-something countries around the world. We are spending about half of all the money that we have on defense, and that amounts to more than the next 20 or 25 countries combined. We're not getting a good bargain for that. When you spend that much money, there has to be waste, and there is. In the last 20 years, the Department of Defense is unable to explain where they spent over $8 trillion. They spent the money. They just can't tell us where it went. They don't have any records of it. That's almost half of our national debt, responsible by the Defense Department, and we don't even know what we got for it. I know one thing we got for it. We've got people all over the world that hate us. As we try to make the rest of the world look like a mini United States, those people, for some reason, resent that. They want to be their own country. They don't want to be like us.
All right. And before we get to the next position, I got a Facebook shout out. Once again, this is from Mark West. He says, doing great, Frank. Excellent work bringing out how the two-party duopoly keeps the people for hearing more options and disenfranchises voters. Well, thank you, Mr. West,
Amen.
for those comments. All right. Moving on to the next plank of your platform, respect for the 10th Amendment.
The 10th Amendment is almost forgotten. In fact, some folks call it the forgotten 10th. And all it is one of the checks and balances that the framers of the Constitution put in there. The legislative checks the executive, and the executive checks the judicial. The judicial checks the legislative, and it's all designed to keep everybody honest. But one component that hasn't been used in that regard is the states are supposed to keep the federal government in check. Okay. Each state is a sovereign entity unto its own, and we found out that that's still enforced by the Supreme Court when the Affordable Care Act was held constitutional, with one exception. The federal government could not tell the states to set up the insurance guidance boards that they wanted. The Supreme Court said everything else is fine, but you can't do that. The federal government is not the boss of the states. And without that check on the federal power, I fear we've seen it get far too big and far too intrusive in our daily lives.
And next is respect the Second Amendment, which is a hot button topic. Excuse me.
It is, and I may not make many friends on this, but I believe the Second Amendment is very important to us for this reason, if no other. It is under assault. It is being changed. It is being amended without going through the amendment process. Now, I don't want my neighbors to have shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missiles, and my neighbors don't want me to have a howitzer. But if we don't want something to happen, if we believe that the government ought to be the one that has guns or determines who can have guns, then we have to amend the Constitution. And there's a way laid out to do that. It's been done 24 times and more in the past. And if it's important enough to these people that want to control the guns in this country, then they ought to go through the amendment process that everybody else has. Because if we don't, if we let the Second Amendment be changed without an amendment process, then we've opened the door for it to happen to everyone. The First Amendment can be altered by actions, by the legislature, by the presidential, if we allow it to happen to the Second.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was going to ask you, I don't think there's anyone out there that says that all guns should be outlawed, but obviously when the Second Amendment was crafted, they didn't imagine that we would have guns that could shoot 100 rounds in 1 minute. They had muskets, which you had to, which it may take you 5 minutes to shoot one little ball out of it. So I just kind of want to get expand a little bit on your thoughts. Do you think, as far as like the assault style weapons, I know you mentioned the howitzer, do you think that the Second Amendment should possibly be changed to outlaw those kind of weapons, or should anybody just be able to get any kind of gun that they want, no matter how many rounds it can shoot or whatever?
There is a view, and I share it, that what they did in the beginning was give the colonists and then the first citizens of the United States the right to keep the same kind of guns that the military had. And I believe that was done for a purpose. They had just fought a tyrannical government and cast it away and set up their own freedom, which we continue to enjoy, because they were able to confront that power with the same kind of weaponry that they had. I believe that we should be able to have 30-round magazines if we want to. And if we don't believe that as a people, if we don't believe that's a good idea, if we believe it ought to be limited to 7, then we ought to amend the Constitution. Not pass legislation which is, frankly, unconstitutional, not empower bureaucrats to do it for us, because it's still unconstitutional.
All right.
I have a question.
Okay, well, go ahead, Kabila.
Speaking of that, there was a city in Arkansas that recently passed an ordinance, I guess you say, to increase the fines of people shooting guns, say, within the city limits. So, along with changing the wording of the amendment to fit today's times, should these and states then maybe start increasing the fine, looking into changing the ordinances or increasing the fines of people who violate, that law?
Oh, sure. That's very different. The Constitution guarantees us the right to keep and bear arms. That means we can have them at our house, we can have them on our car, or we can carry them around with us.
Okay.
But it doesn't guarantee us the right to fire those weapons. Okay. It doesn't give us the right to discharge them anywhere we wish to.
Okay.
And if a city wants to pass an ordinance that says you can't discharge your weapon within the city limits, man, that's constitutional all day long. Okay. And I would encourage folks to do that, because in cities it's difficult. If you're going to do some target practice in the city, you're in trouble, and so are your neighbors. Yes. So we'd rather do that out in the country.
Or maybe just increasing the consequences
yes.
for those that disobey the law or abuse the law.
Absolutely.
All right, the next plank on the platform is close to the Department of Education.
And that's one that came easy, because I I did 23, 24 years in private business in my first life. And after that, I had an opportunity to go to work for the Bauxite School District, and I took it. I have thoroughly enjoyed it for nearly 20 years now. But I've got to tell you, the education in this country is not what it was, and I hope it will again be something better than it is. The teachers and the staff and the administrators at Bauxite High School are among the most dedicated, hardest working, pleasant people I've ever been around in my life. But it's like they're in a race, a rowboat race. And private schools are in sleek wooden craft with good oars and so forth. And the government schools are made of concrete, and they've got teaspoons for oars. Those folks are at an extreme disadvantage. It is amazing what they do to the staff and faculty at schools, the problems that the rulemaking has put on them. And a lot of it, in fact, I'd say most of it, comes from the Department of Education in Washington or in Little Rock. I have absolute faith in the local educators who see their children every day, who know their children, who probably know their parents, and who have nothing but the best intent for those children. I have no faith. After 20 years of seeing the intrusion and the trouble it causes, I have no faith in bureaucrats in distant cities who write rules that tell those local teachers how they're going to interact with their children.
So, Mr. Gilbert, not to cut you off, so
Sure.
would you be in favor of leaving the standards up to the states instead of there being federal mandates such as No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top?
I would, and it's a difficult thing to say that I do support, because the one advantage that the Department of Education nationally had was that they said the child who left California schools and came to Arkansas would be looking at a very similar set of educational standards in Arkansas as that they left. But it's just too high a price to pay for all the other things that come along with that standardization. And I think you'll find when you have local districts in charge of their own curriculum, I think you'll find that most of them will come together and come to some agreement similar to that without being forced to, without getting that other layer of control laid on them.
Okay.
All right, let's go to the phones. Kayla K. Hey, Miss Farrell.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to your guest.
Good morning, ma'am.
I am listening, and you just crossed the T and dotted out to me when you were talking about the people that teach in the schools that are, I don't know what the question how it came about, but you were saying they were local people. I went to school with my Sunday school teacher was my second grade teacher, and my third grade teacher. We're in the same community. Well, school hadn't been integrated at that time, and whatever went on in school kind of transferred over into my home, from my home to my church.
Oh, bless
to
you.
everything that I did, and the decisions that were made in my church and my school, they all kind of interacted together because the people knew, like you said, we knew each other. My parents, they called my parents. And it was just a different. They knew what we needed, they knew the needs, and the needs they gave them to us. It wasn't somebody sitting in the chair 1,000 miles away making a decision.
Amen, sister.
And that was so good, and I'm very proud to have been a part of that era in my life.
Hear, hear.
Not that the kids are not getting everything they need now, but when you're connected, I think it goes back to it takes a village to raise a child.
Yes.
And that's kind of where I came from.
Amen.
So
I tell folks that raising a child is like a three-legged stool. You need the church, you need the family, and you need the school,
yes,
all leaning together to hold that child up. And I know it's not as easy now as it was when you and I were children, but I believe we can find ways for larger communities to be involved in the school process. And if we don't, If we don't do something different, the children are going to be handicapped forever as they leave these schools.
Yeah, because they're going to go into a world that you're going to need it next. It's not. But this is the what they call the
millennials.
Where age group, but everything is right there for them. But if you still need to go back to your roots, to where you came from and where it all started.
Amen. And whether those roots are in South Arkansas, family, and the people that know him best and love him the most.
Yeah, you are so right. I agree with you 100%.
Thank you, man.
Good luck in your campaign.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Farrell, we thank you for the call, as always. And, of course, if you have a call or a question for Mr. Gilbert, the phone number is 870-277-1080. Once again, that phone number is 870-277-1080. You can also post on our Facebook live stream. Continuing on with your platform, sir. Close to the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah. And, again, this is something that we've gotten used to in the last few decades. But if we'll stop and look at how we got here, I think we'll figure out how to unwind it and get back where we want to be. When 9/11 happened, when the towers fell in New York, we were all afraid, and rightly so. And you react in fear a certain way. And it may be the right way, it may be the wrong way, but it's the way that makes you feel safe. That's what you're going to do. We had troops. We had Army and Marine personnel standing guard in our airports. And I think we all know that wasn't an ultimate solution, that we were going to have to do something else because, frankly, in this country, we have laws that prevent that. We don't want the Army and the Marine Corps enforcing law in this country. We want them protecting us. And that's what they were doing. They were protecting us under unusual circumstances. But when we sent the troops back to base, we set up what has turned out to be an abomination. The Transportation Safety Administration, part of this mess, has been guilty of terrible things done in the name of our government. They have sexually harassed people. They have used their high-tech equipment to leer at women. And it's been shown that it's ineffective. 95% of the tests that they've run on the TSA have been failures. They have failed to protect us when they were tested. We're spending money needlessly, we're violating the Constitution needlessly, and we can return to a civilian-based or a police-based system of protecting airports without all of that mess that the federal government has imposed on us.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to wait to the other side. Well, we can go ahead and kind of start with the last platform, which is in the IRS.
Yes, and
you might get some votes off of that.
Friend, anybody that's dealt with the IRS is standing up and shouting amen or say power to the people or something, because it has become the most dangerous arm of the federal government. The tax code is impossible to understand. It's just too large. No average person can understand it. There are lawyers and there are accountants who know parts of it well enough to protect their clients or themselves, to enrich their clients or themselves. But the average person is just at the mercy of the IRS. If the IRS told me tonight that I owed them $26 million for tax penalties from 1937, I wouldn't know how to defend myself from that. It is an agency that's out of control, and we can collect the taxes that this country needs without taxing incomes. And if we do that, if we do a fair tax or a flat tax or no tax, whatever tax we decide to replace the income tax with, it can be done without all the forms and all the regulations that we have to have for an income tax. If you stop and think about it, the government should tax the things that it doesn't want to happen.
Okay.
We don't believe people ought to smoke cigarettes. There's high taxes on cigarettes.
Okay.
And the government ought to leave taxing incomes. We don't want incomes to rise? Of course we do. I hope that's one thing that we can get done quickly is get rid of the IRS.
Okay.
All right, speaking with Mr. Frank Gilbert, candidate for the United States Senate for Arkansas. We'll be back after break. This is Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
Listen to Communities on KLEK 105 FM. We'll be right back.
We're back with Money Matters. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. Home ownership is an important factor in the capacity to build wealth, but there will be times in your life when renting just makes more sense. However, without smart planning, you could wind up spending more than you could afford and hurting your credit. Here's what to do. No matter who the landlord is, get a rental agreement. This lays out both parties' rights and obligations and is an essential aspect in regulating potential problems. Read the contract carefully, including the fine print, and ask questions about anything that's not clear. If you're not comfortable with the terms and conditions, it's better to pass and look for another place than to sign and be legally bound to the contract. Inspect your home carefully on the day you get your key and make a list of everything that's broken or damaged. Request that your landlord either repair the problems or sign off on the list. This way you can't be held responsible for these pre-existing damages when you move out. You should always have renter's insurance. I'm Alfred Edwin Jr. for Money Matters, a product of American Urban Radio Networks.
Money Matters is made possible by the Jonesboro Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, a nonprofit organization dedicated to uncompromising commitment to communities, service, leadership, empowerment. www.jonesboroalumnidst.org.
KLEK presents A Harvest of Spoken Word, Junior Edition, hosted by Quabila Harden, to be held Saturday, November 19th, 2016 at 6 p.m. Location, Whistle Stop Bistro and Catering, 5435 East Nettleton Avenue. It is $12 with the meal included. This will be open mic, karaoke, dance, comedy, and etc. 18 and under to perform. This is a KLEK fundraiser.
The court-appointed Special Advocate Program of the 2nd Judicial District presents Run Crazy for CASA 5K Yearly Race Fundraiser, Saturday, November 5th at the ASU Pavilion. Start time is 8 o'clock a.m. Registration for runners and walkers is ongoing, and Halloween costumes are encouraged to be worn but not required. Prizes will be awarded to the top 3 male and female winners in each age group, as well as the top 5 overall male and female finishers. There will also be t-shirts, pizza, massages, and a costume contest. Proceeds from the 5K will be used to help CASA's mission of helping children taken into foster care due to abuse and neglect. Registration for the 5K and other information is available at neacasa.org. CASA is a nonprofit organization.
Whistle Stop Bistro and Catering, 5435 East Nettleton Avenue at the four-way stop between highways 351 and 463, serving Jonesboro for over 5 years with a motto of, we cater them all, large or small, offers catering and rental space for parties, churches, offices, and fundraisers for holidays and all occasions. They also offer a full breakfast and lunch menu, open Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., 870-275-6239. Details at klekfm.org.
Experience the joy with Bishop Adrian R. Rogers of Fullness of Joy Church, 3307 Ray Street, Jonesboro, Arkansas, 72401.
Did you know that KLEK 102.5 FM is a non-profit organization? Did you know that you can donate to KLEK 102.5 FM and your donation is tax deductible? Donations to non-profit organizations such as KLEK can reduce the amount of taxes you may owe the IRS or increase the amount of any potential tax refund. Support your KLEK today. You can donate by calling 870-277-1080, visiting our studio at 1411 Franklin Street in Jonesboro, or on our website www.klekfm.org. We at KLEK 102.5 FM are blessed and grateful for your support.
And now back to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
And we're back on Community Conversations with our guest, Mr. Frank Gilbert, candidate for the United States Senate for the state of Arkansas. Before we went to break, we were getting Mr. Gilbert's thoughts on his platform, and we was discussing the last one in the IRS. I wanted to piggyback off of his comments. I wanted to get your thoughts on the tax code. Like on the presidential level, Donald Trump, the Republican nominee, has not released his tax returns. However, the New York Times was able to somehow get a copy of his 1995 tax return, and on this return, he reported an over $900 million loss, which he was able to then use a loophole to not pay taxes for at least 15 years, and then after that, nobody knows what went on beyond that. But situations like that in the tax code, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, that is the reason that we have to do away with an income-based tax, because it has been used by the very rich to further enrich themselves, and what that does is undermines the rest of us confidence in the taxing authority of the government. When the government allows the super rich to abuse a tax system, but then uses that same tax system against the average person in a punitive way, it's only natural to resent it. And I think Donald was smart in a devious way not to publish his tax returns, because when we see what people like that do, it revolts us, and it should. I'm ashamed of him. I'm ashamed of him doing that, and I wish he was the only one who had ever done it. Unfortunately, he's not. Nearly everybody who's at that end of the income scale does the same thing.
Well, and you're right, because even Warren Buffett challenged Trump on that, and Buffett said himself, yes, I did take advantage of the same loopholes, but he said, but at least, I did pay some kind of tax for ever since he was old enough to start legally working.
Mm-hmm. And you appreciate a guy who goes the extra mile, who does a little bit at least to be a part of the system. That's better than what most of them do.
All right, and I believe Kabila had a question going. Then you said before we went to break, you had a question about the Department of Education.
Well, just want to get a little more into that discussion as far as, unfortunately it may not get shut down, but would you like to see some restructuring of practices? As we know, most schools, I'm just going to take Arkansas for example, most schools the teachers are having to teach the students to take a standardized test. Yeah. And I understand that taking these tests in turn ensures the school gets a certain amount of money if the students meet certain levels, and I don't know all the details, so forgive me if there are any educators out there, please educate me. But would you like to see some restructuring on how things are done, and so the students are more prepared when they enter the real world and possibly go to college?
Oh, you know it. You have an ultimate goal, which you consider perfection.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen in my lifetime. We're not going to do what I said I'd like to see us do. So obviously there are steps in between that we need to start right now. And one of them is exactly what you just said. Teaching to a test is not education. Okay. It is rote memorization and getting folks ready to answer a few questions. And they're forced to do it. Mm-hmm. The state and national departments of education put together these programs that they feel these things are important and every student should know them, and that's not their job, or it shouldn't be. The local educators know those students so much better, and they understand which ones have brilliant minds and are going to be nuclear scientists or rocket scientists, and they know which ones are not educated that way. They're not ever going to reach that any more than I did. But there are levels of success available to all of us. That's the beauty of our country, is that we don't have to be brilliant, we don't have to be smart, we don't have to be good looking. Nearly anybody can succeed in America if you work hard, you apply yourself, and you shoot straight with people. It'll all work out in the end. And the school system seems to have lost that understanding.
I like to see some restructuring to the special education, and I know this discussion going forever and ever, but I always like to see some restructuring all the way around.
Yeah, and special ed is close to my heart. I do in-school suspension at Bauxite, and I see a lot of special ed students because they are forced into positions, they're put into positions where they're required to meet the same rules that every child does. And an autistic child can't do that. You know, the loud noises, constant noise just affects them differently. And so they act out in the way that protects them from that outside influence, and they get in trouble for it. And we have got to find a way for special ed to work better for the kids.
All right. Mr. West, I'm sorry, I called you Mr. West.
That's a compliment to me.
Well, actually, we have a Facebook shout out from Christy Greg West on the video. So, Mr. Gilbert, we have 2 minutes, so just let the listeners know anything that you want to get out there that you would like to say to our listeners that we didn't get a chance to touch upon, or anything that you want to reiterate on.
I appreciate that. And frankly, the big point I want to make at this point is you have a choice to make, both in the presidential and the Senate elections, also the congressional elections. And if you vote for an incumbent Republican senator to go back to Washington, D.C., then what you're saying is everything's all right in America. We're ready to step forward into a brighter future. May need to tweak a thing or two here, but let's keep doing what we've been doing. And if you elect a fresh-faced young Democrat, you're doing basically the same thing, because it's not going to have any impact on what the Senate does or how they act. Things will continue just the way they have. I encourage you voting different this year. Consider voting for Gary Johnson for president, for Frank Gilbert for the Senate, for Mark West for the House, and for any other libertarian you see there. Because if we're going to make any serious changes in this country, it will have to come from outside the old parties. The Democrats and the Republicans like it the way it is, and if you do, vote for either one of opponents. It won't make a bit of difference. But if you think America needs to change, vote for Frank Gilbert.
All right, Mr. Gilbert, we certainly thank you for your time again. Thank you for making that drive from South Arkansas and spending the night here to come sit in studio with us. All right, KLK and the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council, we do not endorse nor support any candidate, nor was any compensation provided for this interview. This interview was provided for informational purposes only, but like I said, we encourage people to vote. You don't have any excuse, because if you've been listening to our announcement, we do have rides available. You can call us at the station if you need a ride, or call any one of the numbers listed. And of course, our number is 870-277-1080. We'll be giving rides to the polls all the way up to Election Day. You guys be blessed. Have a great day. This is Community Conversations, and this is KLK 102.5 FM.
Thank you for listening to Community Conversations.